Hello, citizens of the multiverse, and welcome back to Dark Knight Nation. I know I haven't posted in a while, apropos my normal, routine, but things have been very busy. New job, going back to school soon, so it's been really hard to keep up to date on making some postings. But I have a really great treat for you today. With Google's whole weird switching of Google Hangouts and not being able to use that to live stream, it's been kind of difficult to get something live out there, but the collabs do not stop. On this episode, I guess, of Let's Talk Comics, I had a great discussion with my frequent collaborator, ComicBoom. We're planning on this whole little series discussing some of the Batman writers in the modern age and the central premise that their run attempts to answer thematically throughout their time on the character. And so over on his channel, we did a discussion on whether or not a happy Batman could be effective, and that's resolving Tom King's Batman run, who is currently on the book as I speak, and that was a fantastic conversation. So if you're not familiar with him, please check him out. Link down in the description below or somewhere up here. He is fantastic. There's a reason I try to collaborate with him as much as I can. And apropos, this video is going to be questioning whether or not darkness is Batman's main driving force, and that's going to revolve around Scott Snyder's work on Batman, mainly his New 52 Batman, obviously, because that's where his Batman is most concentrated, but it does delve a little bit more into what he's been doing post New 52 Batman, including All-Star Batman, obviously Batman The Last Night on Earth, which is currently coming out. But yeah, so I don't want to babble for too much longer. All I want to say is, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like, comment down below letting us know your thoughts, interact with the conversation, and of course please make sure to subscribe to myself down below and click the link to ComicBoom's channel and subscribe to him. But without further ado, let's get into this conversation. Alright, so moving forward in this video series, I think it's appropriate to tackle Scott Snyder, another very recent and currently, at the time of filming, technically an ongoing writer of Batman, not necessarily the Batman series anymore. Scott Snyder wrote 52 issues plus annuals in the New 52, went on to do All-Star Batman, is currently doing his Batman Last Night on Earth for DC Black Label. He has really cemented himself as one of the most quintessential Batman writers, I think, not only of this era in comics, but of all time. I don't think that, and it's difficult to say. And one of the central premises that Scott Snyder's Batman asks is darkness the driving force for Batman? And the darkness can be defined in a couple of different ways, right? Is darkness can be defined as the shortcomings and the evils of the world around him, his internal darkness and what he has to deal with on his own emotionally, both as, Bruce Wayne and as Batman. I think Scott Snyder defines this darkness in a couple different ways, both in Batman's environment, the world around him, and in the darkness within Batman himself. And I think what's particularly great about the way Scott Snyder does it is that he involves Gotham as its own character and the darkness of Gotham, and can Batman redeem Gotham? Does Gotham even need redeeming? Moving forward with this question of, is darkness Batman's driving force? I think it is definitely a very big part of it.
Right? I mean, Metal was all about it. An entire dark multiverse was premised on, arguably, on the Batman mythology with all the different Bat characters in the Dark Universe.
The thing is that Scott Snyder's Batman, the villains, or like the central kind of humps that Batman has to get over, are all relevant to Scott Snyder's fears, right? Mm-hmm. And they're all kind of conveyed as Batman's fears as well, right? So in the beginning, Batman Court of the Owls, what happens when the landscape around you becomes something you don't recognize anymore, when you felt you were comfortable? And then he goes into death of the family. How do your relationships put you at risk, put them at risk? Are your relationships something that can strengthen you to move forward? And then you go into things like Zero Year. What do you do when the world is literally crumbling around you? And he asks a lot of really big and important questions. And it all kind of seems to bring to this summation in Last Night on Earth is, what happens if everything you've ever done is in vain? What if everything you've ever worked towards in your life, everything you've ever sacrificed for, means nothing? And that in and of itself is a darkness, right? That could be construed as another dark driving force for Batman, because at the end of the day, he is so locked on to his mission to ail the world of crime and injustice. The thought that everything he's ever done wasn't effective is going to make him want to continue to pursue his end goal, because it's not finished, right? Like he has more to do. By looking at it that way, effectively what you're saying is everything you've ever done has amounted to nothing. So you have to keep doing it until that nothing amounts to something, and then eventually onto everything.
Well, I would add to that, if I was one of the things that is decidedly lacking from Snyder's interpretation of Batman. Snyder assumes that Batman is absolutely obsessed and is driven by that obsession, and you even see it in the pages of Snyder's Justice League, where Snyder's Batman is always planning, is always obsessive, is always logical, is the second most brilliant man in the universe, in the multiverse, next to Lex Luthor. Super brilliant, but he embraces his darkness. And it's funny that you look at the dark multiverse, all the most powerful people in the dark multiverse, the Batman Who Laughs, and all those dark Batman entities, the Red Flash, the Red Death, and the Drowning, and all those characters. All of them are aspects of an obsession that Batman has in another universe. And it's funny that the one thing that would save the dark multiverse would be Bruce Wayne or Batman embracing just a little bit of happiness. But Snyder's Batman is all about his obsessions, and Snyder takes Batman's obsessions and he extrapolates them to their worst, to their farthest tangents. And it's always his darkest obsessions that create the powerful villains, and it's also the Batman's obsessions that make the Batman the most effective in fighting it. And whereas Tom King is exploring the idea of a happy Batman, Snyder really is in many ways almost avoiding it entirely. Snyder almost writes a Batman whose strength comes solely from his obsession, whether it's with logic or solely with, that's where Snyder's really seems to be doubling down on, is his obsession. And and he's always sort of struggling with it, and it's interesting. So Snyder's all about the darkness, or much more about the darkness, whereas at least with King, and I can't believe, maybe I'm not trying to defend King, but in many ways I'll say this: I think maybe King has a more difficult job than Snyder does. I think it's easier to write about an obsessive Batman where all you're writing about is you're doubling down on darkness. King has given himself a greater challenge by asking a more interesting question. Well, what happened if you infuse a little happiness then? How does that throw a wrinkle into things?
Well, so hear me out. With Scott Snyder, I think it is less about being so obsessed that your life is devoid of happiness, but rather I'd interpret it as Scott Snyder's Batman has the hope that he can pull the world out of the same darkness that he's in, and he's obsessed with hope. And I know it might be a hot take, right? But if you look at this, every single time Batman is using his obsession with his own darkness and the mission to pull everybody out of the shadows. Batman Court of Owls, right? When you fall, when everything you have ever known has been pulled right out from under you, his Batman says, you have to stand tall and you have to move forward. And that is the only way you will ever win, right? And he continues to play with those themes, right? Because if Batman didn't have hope, he wouldn't be fighting the darkness, right? He has the hope that one day he will be able to ail the world of crime. He will be able to push forward. And sure, it maybe that is a product of the 8-year-old little boy that lost his parents and has been scarred. But at the end of the day, I think it is less about Batman pushing away happiness and letting himself be succumbed by the obsession, rather than his obsession is a product of hope, is a product of the fact that he believes that he can pull the world out of the darkness, and that he can do something for the world that didn't happen to him.
And he never gives up. He never gives up.
And he never, yeah. And I think you brought up Metal. Really, when he goes into the forge and pulls out like the 10th metal, I don't think he's finding happiness. I think he is re-finding hope, because when he's walking through with Superman and they both get turned into wrinkly old men and they feel defenseless, hope is lost, right? Like, effectively, you have he is being challenged by versions of himself that are devoid of hope, that at the moment seem like effectively more efficient at being Batman than him, right? But the real thing is for Batman in that moment to find that the most effective Batman is a hopeful Batman that sees a future. And at the end of the day, that is the downfall of those other personas. And I think that's also somewhat consistent in his Batman Who Laughs miniseries, is that, he's given somewhat, spoilers for even like issue 6, for a moment, he was going to give in to that darkness, right? And it also plays with this relationship as to, well, what is the optimal way for Batman to pursue his end goal, resolving around his hope, and so, yeah, for me it is far less about the happiness, and it is his hopes and desires, and effectively, translating into his will to be Batman and to try to save people from the darkness that it kind of consumes him.
Snyder's Justice League 25 is a prime example of the hope you're talking about. Batman has hope in Superman. I mean, Batman goes against his own instinct. Batman agrees with the World Forger that the world should be destroyed in order to save it from doom. Batman admits that the World Forger is logically right, but he sides with Superman because he chooses to believe in Superman's hope.
Right.
Because he knows, he believes in Superman, so he believes in hope. Batman embraces hope in Justice League 25, epitomized by Superman. So that fits perfectly in with what you're saying. Batman is all about hope at the end of the day. But what's interesting is that Snyder's Batman, while at the end of the day, even in issue 7, by the way, spoilers for Batman Who Laughs, Batman actually, through his own willpower, manages to defeat the transformation into the Batman Who Laughs, going against the previous 6 issues, but that's another story. Essentially powered by probably his willpower and his hope. And I think that's interesting. But I still maintain, though, that while he has that hope, everything else about Snyder's Batman is everything shrouded in darkness. His power comes from darkness. His power comes from doom and gloom, and it's always at the 11th hour that Bruce Wayne or Batman sort of, from the jaws of defeat, he'll come back. He'll defeat death. He'll come back to life. He'll have the machine that brings him back to life through the Dionysius or some sort of what's that mineral or whatever. It's always from the darkness that Batman finds his power, and even through metal, everything is always so relentlessly dark, and it's always at the 11th hour that he sort of comes back from that. And again, that makes for good storytelling, and I enjoy Snyder's stories better than King. It's just very interesting that if we're talking about how Snyder's approach to the character is very much 99% of a Snyder story is all darkness, whether it's Death in the Family or Court of Owls. Everything's about doom and gloom and cynicism and darkness, and it's always at the 11th hour that you come through. So there's very little, Batman is the hero in Snyder's tale, because despite the relentless darkness that Batman, at the end, he still manages to find the hope. But if I was to criticize Snyder, my criticism would be, when all you have portrayed Batman as is someone who is fighting darkness all the time, where does he get the hope from? Where does he get his inspiration from? He just seems to have it at the end. And I think if there was one criticism of Snyder, and I say this about his Court of Owls too, and I realize I'm an outlier here, but I think we need some more elements of little bit more levity and more light, and a little bit more, because Snyder's Batman is too much of the uber Batman. He's uber Batman, especially in Justice League. He needs a little bit more. I'd like to see a little bit more light. Give me maybe a combination between King and Snyder to find that nice little comfortable. It's sort of like the Goldilocks in the. It's one bit of porridge is too hot, one's too cold, and one's just right.
So hear me out. I disagree with you. Because for me, I think the thing about Batman is his ability to see through the darkness to what can be. And I think that's entirely relevant if you look at, and I'm going to use the examples that you brought up, both Court of Owls and the Batman Who Laughs. In the Court of Owls, right, we start his entire run off with the people of Gotham talking about what Gotham is, right? And Gotham is ultimately the thing that Batman is trying to save, right? It is kind of like this running analog for the world and the people in it. And people start to define Gotham. And both at the end of Court of Owls and even more at the end of his Batman run, we look at, what is Gotham on the other side of that darkness? Gotham is hope, right? Gotham is the belief that there's something better, that there's something stronger, and that there's something worth living for beyond all the darkness. Because at the end of the day, this darkness that Scott Snyder writes about is a massive analog and can be somewhat ambiguous at times, but centrally is the darkness of really what it means to be human. The depression, the anxiety, the fear, all of it. Batman fights through it. And he's looking for a Gotham on the other side. And if you look at the Batman Who Laughs, right? Essentially, the Batman Who Laughs is trying to get Bruce Wayne the Batman to forget that Gotham on the other side, right? The light at the end of the tunnel, and see Gotham for the darkness in front of him. And then he puts on the visor and he uses the darkness in people's hearts to search and whatnot. But at the end of the day, that is Batman's driving force, right? The darkness drives him in the sense that it prevents. The darkness is essentially the thing that is blocking that light that he sees in the world from truly becoming realized. And that's where I think his Batman is very, very strong, and where I think that, for me, it is balanced. Because if you look at the beginning from when he first touches Batman in the New 52, even to now, and at those median points at the end of each arc, he begins to answer that question under several different contexts, right? And just looking at his New 52 Batman run, we realize that Gotham is many things, right? It is not one concentric thing, because it is made by a group of people. But at the end of the day, as much as at times it can be dark, that darkness doesn't define it. And the thing that drives Batman is that he doesn't want the darkness to define the world around him, because he sees what it can be, right? So the thing that drives Batman, and I think is consistent in Snyder's Batman, is this relationship between the darkness of the world and the hope that he sees beyond the darkness, and the relationship between those two things that pushes him to move forward. And for me is why I think, just centrally, thematically, not in every aspect, it kind of perfectly conveys that message. You know what I'm saying? And that's where I would kind of disagree with you.
Well, yeah, no, fair enough. I don't, and in fact, just to give you a few more, I mean, it's not just, Snyder's not just focusing on the darkness of Batman. He's got an entire Justice League arc that's putting Doom ahead of Justice. I mean, the entire multiverse is facing Doom. It's Perpetua, it's Doom, it's the year of the villain. So if I'm going to say that about Batman, then should I be saying that about the entire Justice League run? And I would even say no. I guess what I'm getting at is, and the thing is, he tells a great story focused on the darkness, and it's always great. I guess my criticism, and this is why I like his Justice League run better than than anything I've read in his Batman. It
Wow,
is,
that's
I
that's
like,
some big claims.
well, I like his Justice League run, but the reason why I like his Justice League run a little bit more is, and this might be a poor reason, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Mm.
With the Justice League, it's a team effort. Batman, and again, it's a great Batman story, but I just find that the entire dark multiverse with trillions and trillions of lives, it's completely governed and controlled by incarnations of Bruce Wayne, of Batman. Everything's focused on Bruce Wayne. Darkness, ultimate darkness is all is all Batman's soul. It's all a Batman analog. Everything's focused on Batman, and it's all darkness, and it's all doom, and it's all gloom, except for the 11th hour, and it's all because of, at the end of the day, ultimately his willpower prevails, and again, it makes for, like, if I've read Metal a lot, and I mean repeatedly, because it's related to Justice League, and I've done enough videos on it, and I love the research. I love how everything ties into place. So I love it. I love Scott Snyder, the story he's told. I'm just being critical that, in my view, I think that introducing a little bit more of I'm going to say that I think Snyder's writing is a little bit simplistic in the explanations in terms of how Batman overcomes the darkness all the time, because Snyder's answer seems to be very, very simplistic. And even with Court of Owls, I thought, at the end of the day, and especially even with Metal, and even with, and I suspect it's going to be the same thing with Last Night on Earth. It's going to be just Batman's willpower. Well, it's going to be some, like, to me, there's got to be some extra element there other than just willpower, or I just suddenly overcame it. Even the Batman Who Laughs issue 7, it first it was suggested that Joker put a toxin in Batman's heart, so that when he to slow his progression, his evolution into the Batman Who Laughs. But then it was suggested by Alfred that there was no toxin, that Joker was lying, that in fact you just did it on yourself, that there's something special about Batman, that there's something just special about Batman. He was he was able to overcome this transformation into the Batman Who Laughs, even though no other hero in the multiverse can do it. No other hero, no other Batman in the dark multiverse can do it. No, this particular Batman is just that good. And it's uber Batman, and I'm just saying, that's my criticism. He just needs to cut back on the uber Batmanness, and just cut back a little bit, and introduce a little bit more plot or something to explain it, other than just saying, oh, it's because he's Batman. Because that's ultimately how Snyder resolves his storylines at the end of the day. I love the journey getting there, but at the end of the day, the explanation, it's still just the same. Well, he's Batman, and he might as well be Green Lantern.
So hear me out, right? I can see where you're coming from, but I don't feel the same way, because for me, I don't see it as it being simplistic. I see it being concentric, right? Because he's writing Batman and in such a concentric way, but I think that he is tackling that concentric idea of Batman from different directions. I don't think we necessarily need to attack all the different aspects of Batman. I think if we tackle one very central aspect from different directions, it allows for a lot of great story, right? And so regarding that, there is something special in and of itself for Bruce Wayne to be Batman and do what he does, right? And I think him being the man that is able to overcome more darkness perhaps than any other character in the DC universe and come out as effective and as powerful and as iconic as he is something special in and of itself. And that's part of what Scott Snyder is saying, right? Is that the reason you might feel like he's saying because Batman is because it takes so much for him to be Batman, to become this thing, this force of nature, or perhaps something even supernatural, that everything else that you could possibly throw at him is less so. It is less challenging for him. Because if he can be Batman, if he can do these things, what you're throwing at him, albeit difficult, he can overcome it because he has the willpower and the hope and the drive to be Batman. And centrally, he's playing with DC's themes of the multiverse, right? And then onto the dark multiverse, because there is always, always throughout DC's history, this centralized importance of the Prime Earth characters over every other iteration that makes them special, right? Because there's a reason that DC Publishing is focusing on these characters, because that on the Prime Earth characters, because they are more significant, they are more effective than any other, right? And so the thing that Scott Snyder plays with through Metal and then onto this with these different Batman is the thing that makes this Bruce Wayne so special is because he never gives up the hope, right? He always sees it, and as long as he can see the hope, just naturally his psychosis, and if you want to get corny, his heart will force him to work towards that no matter what.
I guess, look, let me, I'll make your point another way. I'll make the point you just made another way in a complimentary manner. What I like about, and I'll use Batman Who Laughs as an example, there's something, Scott Snyder exemplifies the fact that embracing your darker side is a choice. That no matter how much toxin Bruce Wayne had within him, he could ultimately still choose not to become the Batman Who Laughs. And that's what he does. His willpower, he still chose to do right despite the pain, despite he overcame all that through willpower and through his determination to win and to do the right thing. He faced a moral choice, and he was able to overcome even his darkest demons, because we all know that our greatest evil is within us. You know what we do, we make our own choices, and as does Batman, as does anyone, and we choose to do wrong. And the Batman Who Laughs has all of us. He gives us a toxin so that we embrace our darker selves, and no matter how powerful a toxin is, it's still just the drug. And so that philosophically, I say to myself, I like the Batman Who Laughs could be an effective story because it says, look, nobody can make you do wrong. It's still a choice. And that nobody can make Batman do wrong because ultimately it's Batman's choice. And in that respect, I grant you, it's a great story. However, I'm going to say that it's a story that we've seen done before 1,000 different ways, always with Batman and his willpower. What I would like to see more of from Snyder is just there's 100 different ways he could have had Batman and Bruce Wayne show some detective skills, some preparation, some planning. There was 100 different ways he could have defeated the Batman Who Laughs with different planning and a little bit more forethought, other than simply at the end of the day, I'm the one Bruce Wayne in the multiverse that's so extraordinary that I'm the only one who can do it, but I overcame it just through sheer willpower alone. That's my criticism.
With that being said, though, it seems like your criticism is more with that particular story than with his interpretation of Batman as a whole.
I will say, though, that does seem to be a theme at the end of the day. And by the way, and again, as much as I love the story, but I will say that there is this sort of effect. You see that playing out even in the pages of Justice League. I mean, he does have a very, sort of pie in the sky mentality of overcoming darkness, and I venture a guess that his Justice League the battle against Doom and Perpetua is likely going to resolve the same way. It's going to probably end up just the willpower of good and light is going to defeat Doom. But
yeah, I mean, just irrelevant of Justice League though. Looking particularly at his Batman, for me, I think that the detective work and the preparation, I thought we saw that fairly consistently throughout his New 52 run. Like when he was, trapped in the labyrinth of the Court of Owls, right? At some point, when he was going insane, he realized what was happening, got his wits about him, analyzed the stone at the fountain, realized the pattern of the maze, understood what was happening. He was able to dig deep and find himself. But that was also a product of the detective work, right? And so on and so forth. They have that kind of direct proportionality to one another. And then in Zero Year, right? He wouldn't have been able to stop the Riddler if he weren't the detective and he couldn't solve the puzzle. And so I want to put the first part of this discussion on Scott Snyder's Batman and whether or not darkness is his driving force to an end. This conversation went on for like an hour. And so to make it more digestible for you guys, I did want to split it up into two parts because I feel like an hour can get really overwhelming. And I genuinely think that we had such a great conversation between the two of us that really dug deep on this side of Batman that you don't really get to hear people talk about too much. So I want you guys to go and watch the second part and not feel like you have to slog through it. But we are going to put an end to part 1 here. If you haven't already, go click the link in the description below to check out ComicBoom. He is absolutely fantastic, and such a mind about him about comics, and his experience reading as a fan throughout all of the changes of the industry is such a unique perspective. And again, we do have a conversation on the central thematic premise of Tom King's Batman as to whether or not a happy Batman can be effective. So go check that out. Again, really proud of that conversation with him, as I am of pretty much all of the conversations we've gotten to have over this last year of us collaborating on YouTube. And so with all of that being said, I want to thank you guys so much for watching and sitting through this conversation. I had a great time chatting with ComicBoom. If you haven't already, please make sure to follow us both on Twitter, myself at DarkKnightNat25 and ComicBoom at Metropolis40, and subscribe to our channels, both of which you can find the links to down below, or just click that red subscribe button. But again, thank you guys for watching, and hopefully we'll see you guys on part 2 of this Scott Snyder Batman discussion.